Isn't there something more? Is God real? And both paths require you to take a leap of faith at some point. The scientific path requires you to take a leap of faith that the scientists are correct in their analyzation, in the observations. And where does it lead you? Still not knowing who was here first. What was before the Big Bang? With this path of spirituality, when you take that leap, you land in a place that gives me, I'll speak for myself, gives me an answer that's fulfilling, where I feel like we don't need to know the answer, but we need to know that there is something more, and that something more has been witnessed by many others, and many others have testified about the power of love and the power of God.
Dun 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 dun.
This sculpted narrative goes out to all the giants upon whose shoulders I stand. If I can see further, it is only because of their storied vision. Let me begin with Richard Feynman.
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? How is everybody doing today? This is Trev with another episode of Spread Love Free Market. And I'm so happy to be here. Thankful to be here. Thankful for you for joining me here on the podcast version of our activism. Last week we had a full testimony and recap of our trip to New York City. You can check that out on our previous episode. Today, we will have an extension of that, but we will also get back to our economic theme with a very, very important podcast that I think you all should hear. It's by Tech Won't Save Us, Abolish Venture Capital with Edward Anguiso. But before we start, let's get into a few announcements. The Book of Free Things. Make sure you support the Book of Free Things. We provide in-store support for our neighbors, food, clothing, making sure they have a dignified way of connecting. And you can support them with your sponsorship, with your membership. Just scan the code or go to spreadlovefreemarket.com or check out our link tree. That's the Book of Free Things. FYA.NYC. We do local shops only grocery deliveries, making sure our flow of wealth comes up from community as opposed to down through Wall Street, where you only get pennies on the dollar. Also, FYA.NYC, best luggage storage in New York City. If you are on your travel day in New York, either arriving or departing, and that time between checking in or checking out and your trip to or from the airport, you don't want to be walking around with your bags when you want to use that time to do something that you will remember for the rest of your life. So log on to FYA.NYC, reserve your luggage storage, mobile luggage storage, the first of its kind in New York City. FYA.NYC will come to you and deliver your luggage to the airport or to your place of stay. Also, if you can, support coming straight out of Buenos Aires, Trinidad. The Buenos Aires SDA Youth Department presents Behold Jesus, a gospel concert, Praise Unleashed, featuring St. Hilaire Brothers, Michael Ron Christopher, Sir Jeremy Thomas, and much more. This is going to be Saturday, August 18th, 2023 at 3:30 p.m. A love offering will be picked up in aid of music instruments for the church youth empowerment. If you want to support, scan the code and we'll put a link where you can help donate. They need support, financial support. So head on over to our link tree to find out more information about how you can help. So As I said, we will be getting back to our podcast reviews on economic justice. And today's topic, Abolish Venture Capital with Edward Anguiso. And I really, really, really hope that you stick around to hear that. There's some really critical things that we need to hear about where this tech is taking us, the harms that it is doing to us. It's almost at a critical mass with now AI on the horizon. And we'll discuss that and we'll listen to that. And I'll add my little 2 cents of commentary to what Edward Anguiso has to say with the Paris Marx on Tech Won't Save Us. But before we do all of that, I want to continue where I left off with the last podcast in terms of my spiritual journey. And last time I spoke of the inspiration and the transformation that I went through when I was in New York City, and the books, the journals that I kept during the years that I moved away from religion and chose a path that led to worldly obsessions and worldly cravings, and how in these journals, started in 1991, I documented many of these experiences that I had, many of the strategies I had for success, many of the things that I did, the drinking, the chasing women, where I had a transformation and accepted that there is a God and that he was speaking to me through song, that I should burn these books as a baptism by fire. And I shared this podcast and I got wonderful feedback from friends and family who took it upon themselves. They were moved to the point of where they reached out to me and said, Trevor, that song that you played while you were talking about your transformation, they received a different message. And the message that they received said to them that these journals that you think you need to purge yourself of, that maybe the message is, no, this can be an example to others who are following the same path, an example to people who doubt, an example to people who are in search of something more, an example to show that you followed this road and at the end of this road there was emptiness. And I listened to the song again. The song was If Anyone Should Ever Write My Life Story. And at the end of the podcast, I am going to do another performance of this track. I really feel this track really connects to me in a really visceral way, and I want to share that message through song. It is the role of the artist to make the revolution irresistible. Tony Cater Bambara said that, and I'm going to do my best to pass this message on through song because it affected me in that way. But back to the books, back to the journals. My neighbors, my cousins reached out to me, said they received a different message, that you can use these books as a testimony of your path and your journey. And I listened to the words again, and sure enough, that is what it said to me. And as you know, if you listen to the last podcast, I did not want to burn these books. I know they're full of things that I am ashamed of, also full of things that I want to remember. It's probably the only memory I have of these days from 1991 to 2000. And there are other books, smaller books that go beyond that. But these are the main bulk of the memories written on paper, almost on a daily basis, of my experiences through that time. And if there was ever a fire, ironically, they would be the first thing I would save. But here I am thinking about throwing them on fire, the exact opposite of what I really want to do. So I listened to the words again and I said, yes, I am going to save the books. And what I am going to do is, as a testimony to my experience, in order to testify to those who maybe who may have doubts, because I still have doubts, and I decided to choose the road, choose the path of faith, choose the path of love, because I tried that other road. Similar to that scene in The Matrix where Trinity and Neo were in the car before he took the red pill, and Neo had his doubts and was ready to flee back to his life that was not real, the life of ignorance and the life in which he can live his life without conflict. When Trinity said to him, "You've been down that road. You know where it leads. Do you really want to go there again?" And Neo got back in the car. And that's the road that I chose, that's documented in these journals. A road that I thought would take me to pleasures and would take me to fame and fortune and satisfying my earthly desires. And in the end, 30 plus years later, I found myself empty, even after finding activism and reaching out to neighbors in need through economic activism. I still said there's got to be more. And what I want to testify to those of you who have doubts, and I still have my doubts, don't get me wrong, and I think I always will. Like they say about those who are alcoholic or use drugs, that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's an everyday fight. And I believe that once a doubter, you will always have doubt in your mind. But you have to realize that there is a leap of faith that you need to take. And even on the road that took me down the path documented in these journals, there is still a leap of faith at some point that you will reach, that you will have to say, there has to be something more. And what I found, that leap of faith is no different than the leap of faith that you take when you choose God and you choose love. So coming from a doubter, one who took a leap, and if you go back to the previous podcast, you will see the signs and the signals that led me to say that I am a believer, and see what it did for me, how in accepting love that I was made whole, that I knew that yes, now there is something more, that yes, there's somebody else in control, that all the planning, the best laid plans are laid to waste if you don't have faith on your side. And how suddenly things started to happen with less effort if I just looked for the signs and followed them. And this is the message I want to share with you. So we are going to be adding a new segment every week, the 20th Century Journals, where I read passages from these books. And I have to be careful not to make this a voyeuristic journey, because there are things in there that I read even yesterday where I said, wow, there's no way I could share that. But I'm hoping that with this disclaimer that was my past life and that I have found something more. That I'm hoping that if someone happens upon this, if I die today, if I am not here tomorrow and somebody reads these books, that they would know that I was a different person then and I am a different person now. But it is still something that scares me. So what I am doing, I am choosing passages that I believe will be helpful, that will be constructive, that will enlighten anybody that's planning to go on that journey away from the love of God, away from spirituality. So on this first entry of the 20th Century Journals, I choose an entry from Monday, January 13th. The Book of Free Things, by the way, my bookmark. And I read about it. It's actually this first journal. This is the first book that was started in 1991, a few weeks after I made the decision to follow my worldly desires. And most of this book is actually filled with my pursuit of athletic uh, success, professional football. And so I know the later journals go into more personal uh, pursuits, but this one, at the end, I think I remembered that at the end of every book, I did a summation, a summary of what was in the book. And this is that entry. Uh, the first entry was November 19th, 1991, a Tuesday. And this last entry is Monday, January 13th, 1992, a Monday. Monday, as I said. And I'll read. After dropping my religious inhibitions, I was freed from many other restrictions I put on myself. And as a result, I changed as a person. Before my change, I was afraid of doing things such as having sex, drinking, and cursing, partying, especially on Friday nights. Sorry, let me read that again. The grammar in this is horrible, just so you know. Before my change, I was afraid of doing things such as having sex, drinking, and cursing, partying, especially on Friday nights. Restraining myself from these things prevented me from blending in and socializing effectively with peers. It was a crude thing I was doing to myself. In effect, I was isolating myself from others. Our religion, this religion being Seventh-day Adventist, our religion is like an exclusive fraternity in which its members behave differently than their peers. That behavioral difference costs me in the aspect of who I am today, which is a person who finds it very hard to hang out or have the type of girl I want because I am too boring. That is what Raven told me about Christmas 1990. Raven was probably the most beautiful girl I ever dated. She initiated the relationship by telling Joe, what is this? Okay, I think I have to go into something else. Sorry. Okay. All right. Yeah, I want to get to the part that I really wanted to read. I actually put it on. Oh, here it is. Okay, so skip a few pages. There's a lot of stuff like that. Oh my goodness, Raven was beautiful, by the way. Okay. So in summary, 1991 was the year I started to live my life and started to find myself. I feel freer than I ever did at any other time in my life. I do what I want, say what I want, and pursue the dreams I always wanted to pursue. I realized I was limiting myself from reaching my full potential. I believe I am becoming a much more interesting person and also a much more ambitious person. I became a dreamer searching for fame and fortune. I don't believe there is anything wrong with being a dreamer, as long as you are realistic about your chances of fulfilling and reaching your goals. And dedicate yourself to do the work necessary to obtain your goals. I think this attitude will lead to my success in some field that I love. And if I get nothing else from my effort in fulfilling my dream, in the end, I will know what type of mental and physical effort I am capable of when I really want something. And this knowledge will be the measuring stick I use to determine whether I am reaching my maximum potential in anything I pursue for the remainder of my life. 1991 will go down as the year I was free to become who I am now and probably who I will be later in life. That's actually not the part I wanted to read, because it was something about religion here. What is going on? I put it on the post. Okay. Oh, maybe what I skipped over before was it. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Yeah, so that other part. So I'm going back a little, actually. That was the end I read. Okay, so this is the part I really wanted to read. I may have to edit this out. Maybe not. I didn't have a realistic chance of... Okay, so I talk about... Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I guess I have to read about this football thing here. All right, this is it's more complicated than I thought to read this. All right, so let me just start here at the paragraph. I believe the number one thing my changing beliefs has allowed me to do is pursue a football career. Football is my first love. I remember when I started playing in Flappers football heaven. We played 2, 3, and sometimes 4 times a day, and I was the best player there. Physically and skillfully, I did it all. I always dreamed of playing pro ball, but I knew I didn't have a realistic chance because of my religion. I came at the first crossroad in high school when I was asked to travel with the varsity team my first year. I had to turn it down because of my religion. I would have been a high school star and eventually a pro star, but it was that year I set the pattern for the rest of my life. If I had not made that choice right now, I would have been a superstar waiting to be drafted. That decision was the toughest I made at the time. I gave up fame and glory, all in the name of religion. It was the right decision, and under the situations at that time, I would make the same decision. In hindsight, I only wish the situation was different. Now that instead of waiting to be drafted, this is not it. Sorry, I'm going off now. Okay, I have to find out where the stuff I need to read is. Okay, I'm going to read off the computer because I know I put it there. And that stuff is probably interesting to you, and it's probably good for those of you who have ambitions. There are good nuggets of inspiration there, but let me just talk on that since I read it. The thing that really negatively impacted me, and I think it affects capitalism, harmful capitalism as well, is this need for fame and fortune, this pursuit and this ambition. It really competition, and as I said in our first freedom market at our activist meetings back in Brooklyn, my number one thing that I would like to curtail, my number one vice is competition. And you see it there in those pages. And to the pursuit of fame and fortune, it's this individual, rugged individualism that really contributes to us looking out for self first and willing to walk over or run past others so that you could get what you want. So I want to put that in the proper context of where I am today. I did not see that. Even 91, when I was 21, up until 49, 50, this was fine with me. Now, knowing that the harm that that does in our overall capitalistic economies, harmful capitalism, that this is bad, that we need to look to help our neighbors, community, to not compete, to not create the enclosures that Marx talks about, the closing off the commons. This is the thing that's caused all the damage that we are feeling today. And we'll go a little bit more into that with Tech Won't Save Us. There's a really insightful commentary on what's happening now with big tech, venture capital, all of this stuff. But before that, let me complete this journal. I'm going to read directly from the pages that I put on my slides. So here we go. Hopefully I can see it. And I read, "It is very true when they say, don't get married at a young age because people change and young couple may change in different ways and grow apart. I look back at 1991 and I have to say it is the year I changed drastically. This is a landmark year in my life. For the record, I stopped going to church. I lost my virginity. I changed my major. I decided to pursue a pro football career. I drank. I changed my attitude of people. I cursed at a higher level. I partied and many other smaller things. I think it started when I decided that I was an atheist and stopped following my religion. I think it was the scariest and biggest change in my life. I always had my doubts, but this year they reached their summit and came out. Until finally I made the decision to stop attending church and as a result, telling my parents. I was scared of being wrong at first and as a result, committing my soul to eternal damnation. But this was an effect of being conditioned all my life to believe this. It was very hard to wipe out all that training. I still haven't completely let go, but I can't continue to follow religion when I believe it is an answer, that it is a way of relieving man's fear of death. Very ritualistic and very effective. But how can there be so many religions and each claiming to be the only right one? I believe you have to step back and take an impartial view to understand how I feel. What it boils down to is that there is an inherent flaw in religious teaching. If all men are equal and all use their God-given sense to decide what religion is best, using criteria that they consider the most important to them and most clear to them, how can a man go to hell for choosing one religion over another? Who am I to say that you are wrong in doing what you truly believe is best to get to your heaven? Isn't there a chance that I may be wrong? The bottom line is that we all are humans that make mistakes and choices. No human has a patented connection to God, exclusive to Him. So basically, you are taking as much a chance in Christianity as you are in reincarnation theories. And added to that, all religious beliefs are unsubstantial. I'm trying to say I can't even say it now. No wonder I wrote it badly. Unsubstantiated, I guess, and non-fact based by nature, and seemingly a combination of mythological type superhuman tales and devices to relieve man's fear of death. I find it very difficult to believe. I'm not saying there isn't a supernatural force out there. I'm only saying we don't know what it is, and scientifically, that is the only conclusion we can come to. I also believe if there was a God and a heaven and hell that religions speak of, He would make it clear to us which choice should be made by using the sense He gave us, not blind faith. It seems so haphazard for a perfect being who made a universe based on perfect order and sense to use such an unclear and unorderly way to prove His existence, especially if He is so jealous and concerned that we worship Him. And finally, for the record, the Bible says God is perfect. That is a contradiction. He made at least two mistakes: Lucifer and Adam and Eve. That's three. Shouldn't be interjecting, by the way. Read it verbatim. Anyway, back to the reading. Perfect people don't make mistakes. If He is perfect, everything He does and creates should be perfect. And I'm definitely not perfect. My nose is a bit large. Ha, ha, ha. And it goes on to my losing my virginity. We're not going to read that. And so that is the 20th Century Journal's entry for today, in the days before the internet. So take it for what it's worth. I will do my now kind of take on that. These are the doubts that even to this day I still have. But I guess what I would like to say with what I just read, what I just wrote and what I just read, the way I felt back then, and I still have many of those feelings, but what I chose to do is because following that road, what I found is at the end, as true as that may be, and as strongly as I felt about that, and those feelings have not necessarily gone away, what has changed is the fact that even that road and one that followed the most scientific and common sense approach, practical approach to our existence, at the end, they were still left the question of, isn't there something more? All the science is always going to be an unanswered question. And it is no different than the path that I am choosing now. Isn't there something more? Is God real? And both paths require you to take a leap of faith at some point. The scientific path requires you to take a leap of faith that the scientists are correct in their analyzation, in the observations. And where does it lead you? Still not knowing who was here first. What was before the Big Bang? With this path of spirituality, when you take that leap, you land in a place that gives me, I'll speak for myself, gives me an answer that's fulfilling, where I feel like we don't need to know the answer, but we need to know that there is something more, and that something more has been witnessed by many others, and many others have testified about the power of love and the power of God. And if for no other reason, even if you go back to the practical approach, if that brings relief, relieves stress, allows me to feel that I am not the one making all the decisions, that there's a grand designer out there working on my behalf, looking out for me, then, my friends, that's two equal paths. If I'm going to choose one of two of those paths, I'm going to choose the one that leads to love. So, thank you for allowing me to share that. Thank you to my cousins and my morning group, my family, who have inspired me to continue to testify in the name of love and in the name of something greater than self. And that name is God. Now let's move on to the podcast review. And I want to share this podcast that I heard, and I listened. I'm a big fan of Tech Won't Save Us with Paris Marx. I think this is the most insightful and the most informative podcast when it comes to holding big tech accountable. And in this episode, they speak about something that I believe really strongly in: abolishing venture capital. And the interview is with a young brother named Edward Anguiso, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I just want you to listen. I'm going to play a clip now, and as usual, I'll come back at the end. I have 3 clips today that I want to share. And don't forget to stay tuned. At the end, I will be doing my performance of the best thing that ever happened to me, because it means so much to me. But here we go. First clip, Tech Won't Save Us with Paris Marx.
Obviously we've been talking about these complete failures of billionaires, and we've been talking about the venture capitalists. But what is the actual impact of giving these men, and in the most case they're men, of course there are some women involved, but these people who hold this immense influence because they kind of hold the purse strings of where money is going to flow in the tech industry and in the wider economy, what effect does that have on the type of technology that gets developed, but also on the type of society that develops as a result of those investments?
I think this is a really crucial question, because this is one of the biggest drivers as to the type of technology we get. If you are a venture capitalist or groups of venture capitalists competing for and looking for places to park money that will give you excessive returns, you're going to prioritize business models that can achieve monopoly scale. You're going to prioritize business models that can advance rapidly the digitization or the privatization on the digital platform of daily life. You're going to advance surveillance platforms. You're going to advance labor exploitation platforms. You're going to advance schemes that either involve regulatory arbitrage, things that will help you move fast, break things, take advantage of loopholes, scale up and use capital as a weapon. and integrate yourself into life as a parasite so that you can't really get ripped out, right? I think that as a result, we end up getting kind of the worst versions of things that we might want or need that satisfy a real problem, but only in like a very perverse sense, right? Like, let's take the gig economy. A lot of the app-based labor platforms meet a few holes in our current system in a very superficial and perverse way, right? There's a huge amount of underemployment and people are in need of work and they have this car, they might have a home that they think they can wean out more worth out of to help them make ends meet. And then there's also the fact that in a lot of our cities, right, we have food deserts, we have transportation networks that are falling apart or are underserviced, we have shortages of housing, or we have huge hikes in rental costs. And so as a result, there's this idea that maybe these things can be met with the private market. But the solution to all of these problems would look very differently if we were interested in going outside of the marketplace and not instead of through it. Because what we're doing by handing it over to private enterprise, but specifically to a sector of private enterprise that is so maniacally focused on excessive returns in the short term, is that we are building out platforms that are as engaging as possible, that have reserve supplies of labor in the labor platforms and of supply in the housing ones to try and attract customers in the early stages and then hike up the prices later on, degrading the quality of the whole thing that they scaled up and then used to displace the public variant, right? And then we're also encouraging in people this idea that infects the society at large that the way to solve some of our social problems and our political problems is to introduce market logic, right? We don't need political vehicles for changing our society. We need economic ones. If people in your community cannot get to where they need to go, you don't need a bus. You need an on-demand ride-hail service. And if they don't have homes, you need to figure out some way to integrate the market into that approach, right? And so on and so forth. They don't have food. Well, we need on-demand grocery delivery services instead of rethinking how we provision food in the country or in the city or in whatever scale you want to think of. And so we end up getting really monstrous versions instead of experimenting, right? Because you could imagine what a public ride-hail option would look like, right? I mean, and we have, the taxis were one component of it, but not, in of itself a perfect example. But a public option would be very different because it would ideally would complement mass transit and would also come with massive expansion of mass transit and the various modes of transit you could use, whether it's bikes, whether it's skateboards, scooters, whatever it is, whatever makes sense. But also the reason why these platforms are cheap because they have so many drivers on the back end. And so to keep so many drivers on the back end, you have to lure them into predatory conditions, right? So you increase the pay on the front end and then you decrease it on the lower end. And then you also have to have some way of managing churn, and you also have to have some way of pushing them to drive more and more and more, right? So you introduce quota systems, or you introduce promotions, or you introduce these algorithmic overseers to try to randomize earnings and keep people hooked, trying to make ends meet, right? And so you end up creating, for the private version, a really exploitative thing on the back end that sucks in workers who are underemployed and now traps them into debt, traps them into worsening working conditions and health conditions just because they don't have coverage, they don't have adequate funds or means to, take care of themselves. Some of them are living in the car, so on and so forth. And you're making worse one aspect of the social problem. And then you're getting people to use these things more and more, starving some public transit systems, encouraging people to try to, to create their own startups that are modeled after this thing, right? I think it ends up creating a vicious feedback loop, right? Where people start thinking that the solution to society's problems are these private enterprises that dissolves the social bonds between us and that trap us or provide a really glitzy, appealing consumer option, but on the back end is a worker who provides that service and is exploited. And the only reason you can get it that way is because of how deeply they're exploited, right? This is the real cost of it, right? You have the short-term parasites. These venture capitalists have introduced this idea that short-term greed, corrosion of the society, privatization of anything that's public, atomization of people, these are the ways to solve the political and social and economic problems of our times. and coincidentally give us even more money, right? And so we're just giving accelerant to the arsonists, we're giving wrenches to the saboteurs. Like, we're letting the people who've created these problems make even more money off of them.
Yeah, like as you're describing that, basically exactly what I'm thinking of is that the technology is like a Trojan horse, right? Like you have these VCs and these founders who point to their technologies and say, look, like we're doing all these wonderful things. We're going to solve all these problems in society by rolling out our shiny technology that's going to do all these great things. And that technology is progress. And, this is just how we make the world a better place. And then, within that kind of technology, within that kind of Trojan horse that they're kind of bringing through the gates is all of these market forces, all of these forces of privatization, all of these efforts to ensure that workers are precarious and, have much less power to be able to push back against these forces. But they are able to kind of successfully do this because the marketing and the PR operation for technology in the tech industry has been so successful. And the media, in many cases, has been so kind of ineffective in actually telling us what is actually going on here and just kind of repeating the PR lines.
Amen to that. So that was the longest clip we will play, but it was an important one. And just a little background information. My dad was a taxi driver for 38 years in New York City because of Uber for the medallion, which he was basing his retirement on, crashed. And in the end, he lost the medallion. He bought it at $30,000 and it was valued at around $1 million at the time, and he couldn't sell it. Literally months after he retired, the market crashed. And it was an ongoing battle for the years following that about Uber and the exploitation that's happening there, and how Mayor Bloomberg played a pivotal role in crashing the medallion market, and how we as consumers were praising these founders for creating such a beautiful product, and it is a great service. But at what cost? The exploitation of workers who are given the bait and switch. You will be able to work, as they said in this clip, and provide for yourself at your own time, on your own schedule. But once they have them hooked, and once they have crashed the market that was so reliable for decades and decades and centuries, I may be off on that, but for a long time, once you crash that market, and the medallions, first of all, the medallions were there for a reason, to regulate how many drivers are on the street, because if you have too many drivers competing for the same number of passengers, it's not a sustainable model. And everybody could see this from the side of the medallion owners. But yet it was allowed to happen. The market crashed, and once they had the drivers hooked with these loans and with these cars, and they couldn't afford to pay their insurance and their rents, because after they hooked them in, these low rates and this great fares, once they had them hooked and they crashed the taxi market, guess what? Now we will lower the fares and we will increase your burden. And this is the pattern that they are identifying here. And we as consumers need to be aware of the damage and harms of big tech. They are never looking out for you, the consumer. They are looking out for their shareholders. I do have a point of contention with what was said here, which is that I don't think it's a choice between public or private. I think there is a third option, and it is an option that we are building here at Spread Love Free Market, which is a private market in which the flow of revenue comes up from community, where you put in the incentives that allows the same consumers that will support Uber, have them support the local economies. CPR, compelling, practical, radical. The compelling aspect of this is that we use free. We use things that people want to get their attention. Once we have their attention, we then expose them to local economies, local businesses. And once we do that, that flow of wealth comes up from community, and it leads to the radical change of not having this trickle down dollars going to venture capital, going to shareholders, and coming down to community, pennies on the dollar. And the bulk that goes to the shareholders are based on exploitative economies. This will change if it comes from the community. If there's more for the community, then we lose the class struggles. We lose the harmful racial narratives that says it's us against them, when it's really all of us. The 99% are one, and the only them that there is the 1%. They are the ones that hold the purse strings, that have the power. So I'm going to go on to the next clip here. This clip here deals with AI, artificial intelligence. Is it another hype cycle?
To the gig economy, similar to a lot of the iterative waves of tech hype that have happened. Everything is a tech company, everything is a bank. Because this is like a sort of frontier and early days thing, you can lie. You can just lie about what your thing can do or might be able to do in a few years.
What, Ed? You're suggesting that tech founders would lie to us?
Never. So a lot of the lines, like if we were to sit down and rattle off what every single tech company that exists today, that's prominent today, said it was interested in doing throughout the years, how many of them would have told the truth, right? How many of them probably just lied last year about the rollout of some product or the intention that they would have behind applying some service, or who would work at it, or what the conditions would be like, right? Every single thing out of these people's mouths is a lie. Almost every single thing, minus the stuff they can immediately get in trouble for. And I think that AI offers a huge opportunity if you're an investor to get in with your friends, lie about what they're building, lie about what they're doing, make a lot of money off of it. And when it fails, say, well, this stuff is really complicated, man. It turns out we don't know how intelligence works. It turns out we don't know how to replicate a human mind. It turns out that we can't do any of the things that we've been talking about. We can't make AGI. We can't make a image generation bot that makes a normal looking human being or a human with normal amount of fingers. We can't do any of these things that you might have been interested in and valued us at $2, $3, $4, $5 billion at. But we will be able to pull the money out. Right. And that's the more important thing. And we'll be able, and I think this is then, the other side of it, right? By virtue of investing in things and the act of trying to make money, they sustain the hype cycle and keep the dream alive, right? I think we should be viewing investments by Andreessen Horowitz or by Sequoia into AI firms that are clearly bullshit as not just an attempt to make money off of but to keep the dream alive, because other people will take that signal and try to either get in on that company or get in on a company that's doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, right? Regardless of whether there are advancements that justify it, regardless of whether that's actually technically feasible, regardless of whether the people at the firm have the expertise or the capability to do it, regardless of whether any of this is anything more than vaporware. The act of investing generates hype to sustain the frenzy until some large deflationary event happens.
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo what you're saying, right? Like, I don't think that these AI companies are going to replace workers. I think the goal there is to de-skill and then reduce the power of workers yet again, right? Because this is what they do.
So amen to that. Yes, that is exactly my feelings. AI might be a good tool. It might be another way to search, might make things easier. But the hype is all about raising capital, about venture capitalists and billionaires trading money off and getting to trade billions of dollars and exploit more workers and lower the wages and exploit. So for all of us who are thinking that it's an existential threat, AI is an existential threat to humanity, they are not the threat. It is not the threat. The threat to humanity are the billionaires who continue to push a narrative of divisions so that they can continue to make their billions with impunity. And I want us to be aware So thank you for sharing that. We have a couple of other clips. We'll be almost done with the clips in a bit. And then we can get into my wonderful performance of the best thing that ever happened to me. But first, here's Tech Won't Save Us.
The hype cycle and the way in which these people talk about it, figure out ways to make things that are more profitable and to instill or lock in political, social, and economic outcomes that ensure they're at the top, right? And so when we're looking at the AI thing and the hype cycle and the way in which these people talk about it, Andreessen comes out of this circle, this group, this lineage of people who I suspect are so deeply interested in this project that's transforming society because they have on some level discussed with the various political forms, the social forms, the economic forms, but also with humans themselves, and that we have all these inherent limitations on us, that we need to transcend. We have, the limited lifespans. We have limited abilities to think or to compute because they think we're all spiritual machines in one way or another, right? There are all these singularitarians that think that, human beings are 1.0, the version 1.0 of something that's going to transcend the limits of humanity, that's going to merge with the AI, merge with the biology with the computational, and create something that'll be spectacular. And then that's what we're fighting for, right? And yeah, along the way, we can make a lot of money. In fact, we should make money along the way because that's the only way this is going to happen. But that also the world we live in, the bodies we occupy, the politics we engage in, the economy that we all are a part of, the social relations that we have are miserable or lesser than what they could be. And we are fighting for that future where everything is transcended and better, but also where we are deciding the form of it, and we are sitting at the top because of all the money that we made and all the decisions that we made, right? And so, to sum up that rant, I think the way to look at the AI thing is like you have the marketing strategy, you have the sort of a plot, a conspiracy almost to try to get people to think about AI in a certain way and to invest in AI a certain way and to believe that it will come out a certain way, but also this desire both to make money in the short term and, for the first time to think about the long term, but only in terms of at the end of the day, it will all be worth it because we will transcend this, this mortal coil so long as we take over everything, in one way or another, or, proliferate and inculcate our ideas across the population forever.
I really like how you describe that. And I think it does show us kind of like the dangerous ideas that kind of undergird a lot of this kind of AI thinking that we need to be challenging and that we need to be critical of and not just falling for, even though, the idea of having a nice little Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder sounds great, I'd be down for that.
So that's a clip about AI, continuing on the AI theme. And I think what's really important about that clip is it kind of goes back to what I was talking about in terms of faith, in terms of what leads down that path. And just for the record, I mean, is this the script for the prequel to Matrix or not? Come on. I mean, is it just me? But anyway, I digress. This idea that you are touting AI as version 2.0 of who we are, that you are seeking something more, something greater than self. And this is what you are working on. But you're going to make a lot of money along the way, as if that's not going to be completely harmful to the human race. And we'll get into that with the next and final clip. But this speaks to the fact that man is in search of something more. But it's there. It's already there. Faith, the leap of faith in love and in God, is giving us the answers that we need. And if you are thinking that the leap of faith is in dividing, in class conflict, in the few having more than the whole, that this is going to lead to a world that is better, making the world a better place, then I've got news for you. That, as they say, what would Jesus do? he won't keep all of the money for himself. I tell you that much. So just to touch on the spirituality theme in terms of practical, in terms of science, in terms of spirituality. I choose spirituality. I choose love. So let's play the last clip, and this speaks to the existential threat that we face, not from AI, but from class and billionaires, unchecked, unmitigated power. So here we go. I'll see you guys on the other side.
These people would create a global apartheid system that would probably be highly rigid and hierarchical and delineated along lines of race and class and gender. And that would be regulated with violence, right? Because these are also the same people who are ensuring that we have much more lethal drones and smarter systems to regulate them, and that we have hardier weaponry for police departments and for military forces. These are people who would turn the world, are already violent, tightly organized along these discriminatory forms world, into something even uglier, and potentially do it permanently, right? If they gained enough power and global sway with these ideas. And so that's what we are up against. People who would, if they could, institute just like a permanent sort of caste system along different orienting lines, right? And I think that makes them especially dangerous, right? It takes a while to build up to that conclusion and realization, but it has been there from the beginning, from the earliest days of Silicon Valley, from the earliest days of the thoughts and the influences they have, and more presently today in some of the most prominent figures like Peter Thiel, as an example, on his intellectual network and cadre. These are people who they want to transform the world for worse because they will be better off in that.
So that's it from Tech Won't Save Us. The very dire, pessimistic world that we really have to fight against today. And there will come a point, if it continues on the trajectory, where they may be a point of no return. And I am doing my little part to fight for changing that trajectory. Shop local. Believe it or not, something as simple as shopping local en masse, shoppers unite, is something that I think can really impact this trajectory that big tech is taking us. So that's it for this. That's all we have for Big Tech Won't Save Us. Check them out. Follow them. It's really important that you be informed about what's happening with big tech. I think we have reached a point where, en masse, society understands that tech is not for the better, that unmitigated tech is for the worse, that it has created this division. It sucks our attention. It's monetizing our attention. It's exploiting workers, all for the benefit of a few. It's affecting legislation. It supports anything that keeps the classes distracted from holding them accountable for the harm that they are doing to us and to the planet. So, all right. So, before I wrap it up, let me make a few more announcements before my big performance that you all have been anxiously waiting for. And let me make a few announcements here before the end of the show. I help our neighbors at Maria Hernandez Park. I shared a moving story of the neighbors that we met there in need. Because of the class divisions, because of the exploitation, because of the privatization, because of the closing of the commons, which extended to borders. There should be no borders. Because of all of this, that we have the issues and the situations. New York City now has a homeless issue that should not exist had we lived in a world where the masses were sharing in the wealth of their output, of their production. The alienation that has taken place in the last 500 years has wreaked havoc across this world. So support if you can. Scan the code or go to spreadlovefreemarket.com and hit the Activist Lounge link, and little as $5 a month will go a long way. And join us here in Spring Hill, Florida. We have our Activist Lounge Saturdays and Sundays. We changed the time, so make sure you check in. This weekend, it's going to be Saturday, 3 to 5. Sunday, 11 to 11:30, both starting at Miguel's Latin Market, 2128 Mariner Boulevard. And this is what we hope to bring to Brooklyn as well. But meet us there. Support the community. We are going to be doing an outreach. We are going to be on Sunday giving away groceries, and on Saturday just connecting, speaking with each other, conversing, going house to house, introducing ourselves to our neighbors. So church is where the gathering is, and this is our form of church, the Activist Lounge. So finally, I am going to share a song that really inspired me, that really was a big part of my revelation, of my transformation. And this song is something I heard when I decided to believe, to have faith and believe in God, and to believe in something greater than self. These were the words that I heard that first prompted me to burn the journals that I have. But then with my family reaching out to me after hearing this podcast, saying, no, this is your testimony. So this is the song that I use to testify, to share what it is that I want to do and how I want to use my skills as a conduit for a greater message. So here we go. Bear with me. You know, I'm not a singer, but what I am is less important than what I hope it will convey. It is the role of the artist to make revolution irresistible. So here is my attempt at art. I've had my share of life's ups and downs. God's been good to me. The downs, they have been few. I guess you can say that I've been blessed. I guess you can say God's been good to me. If anyone should ever write my life story, for whatever reason they might see, he'll be there between each line of pain and glory. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. There have been times when life was hard, but always, always, always you pulled me through. For every moment when I was hurting, you were there for me, even as I didn't see you. If anyone should ever write my life story, for whatever reason there might be. And he'll be there between the lines of pain and glory. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. If you're at home, sing with me. Is the best thing that ever happened. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you, neighbors. Thank you for allowing me to share that with you. Thank you for joining us, Spread Love FM. My name is Trev, and I'll see you next week.